you have to make sure that you understand what are the demands in the fields of research. People who captured the concepts of data science very early when that expansion came into play are like the professional, high-level personnel in the field now. So who left behind that don't know about data science doesn't have anything related to that field. So that's one of the examples. So you have to make sure that you capture that changes and then get adapted to them very fast.
Hello everyone, welcome to another segment of the interview series conducted by the Department of Chemistry of University of Colombo. I'm Pabasarani Gamlat with Gaesha Tilini, two of fourth year undergraduate students of University of Colombo. I'm so excited to have an opportunity to introduce Dr. Tharanga Wijethunga, who currently works at the Vertex Pharmaceuticals. She investigates crystal engineering and supramolecular chemistry. We would like to thank you for giving us a valuable opportunity to share your experience with us.
To start the conversation, could you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I think Pabasarani gave a very good introduction. So I'm currently working as a scientist at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. Before that, I did my postdoctoral research at MIT in chemical engineering department. So there my research was focused on crystal engineering, crystallization, heterogeneous nucleation, and epitaxial growth of crystals. And before that, I obtained my Ph.D. in chemistry from Kansas State University. Also, my research there were in the fields of crystallization and crystal engineering, as well as supramolecular chemistry. So that's kind of a bit of a background about me and how I came to this position.
Okay, madam. Madam, can you share with us about the days you spent in the University of Colombo?
Yes, so I joined University of Colombo Faculty of Science as a biological science intake in 2006. And I studied chemistry, biochemistry, zoology, and computer science there. So after the first 2 years, I was fortunate to be selected to pursue a chemistry special degree. And so for my final year research project, I worked with Professor Tharanga Wijethunga and Professor Dhammika Dissanayake, and I worked on extracting polybrominated diphenyl ether compounds from electronic and electric equipments. And after completing the undergraduate degree, I got the opportunity to work as a demonstrator in the first year chemistry lab. And then after that, I got the opportunity to come here.
Okay, madam. It is very interesting to hear about those days. We would like to know what influenced you to become interested in science and pursue a science career. Was there any reason to choose this field specifically?
I think I liked science from very young ages, like in school when you start learning science, I think in third or fourth grades, so I think I had the interest in science from those days. I think partly it was because I was curious about things, and the other part is I always had highest mark for science subjects for some reason. So that's one reason too. And then for my A-levels, I picked biological sciences. And by then I didn't have any direct aim, where should I go? But during the 2 years of A-levels, I got fond of chemistry. So I thought maybe I should do something related to chemistry or related field. And then I got the opportunity to join University of Colombo from my first attempt in A-levels as a biological science intake. And then I got the opportunity to do a chemistry special there. And so my path was I think it was my aim to go into chemistry was set from my A-levels. And then, as you all know, I got the opportunity to do my PhD in chemistry and the postdoctoral work related to chemistry plus chemical engineering. And now I work in the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm applying the knowledge of the chemistry and my research applications in crystallization, crystal engineering, those fields.
Really interesting, madam. Did you have some hobbies that have later become a part of your science career?
Uh, Let me say it like this. So I think I had like various hobbies over the years. Some were very temporary, like I got fond of doing something, and then few weeks or few months later, I just got bored of it, something like that. And there was some that sticked with me. And I think one of those hobbies were like collecting nice stones. So when I go to my grandparents' place, they lived in Ratnapura. So it's famous for gems. So I was collecting small stones, thinking those are gems, but those were very young ages. So that was, I think, one of the hobbies that might be related to what I'm currently working on, the crystallizations and crystal engineering. So I'm making crystals. And when I get a nice crystals out of my processes, I still get that excitement when I had in my young ages when I saw a nice stone. So I think that would be probably the only thing that's related to what I'm doing now.
Okay, madam. How long have you been involved in the field of research? And what are your areas of interest?
So I think as for research, I started doing research when I did the undergraduate studies at University of Colombo. The fourth year research project was the first exposure that I got to do some research. And then when I came to Kansas State University to do my PhD, then I got the opportunity to join this field of crystal engineering or crystallization. And that's when I start working in this particular field of research. And from then up to now, that's been my field of interest for research. And so to give like a brief introduction, what does that mean, crystal engineering, crystallization, what I do in those fields. So during my PhD, I was mainly working on co-crystallizations. So the idea of co-crystallization is you use intermolecular interactions like hydrogen bonding to put together different molecules to form like single crystalline phase material. By doing that, we can alter or change properties of materials. For example, I worked with explosive materials. So the idea there was, can I make co-crystals of explosives that had some kind of a bad property? Let's say one of the compound that I worked with had a very high reactivity. So when I combine that particular explosive compound with another compound to make a co-crystal, I could diminish that reactivity while still keeping the properties that we want to have in that particular explosive, which is like the energetic properties. So that is one example from my PhD. And then at MIT, again, my research on heterogeneous nucleation and the epitaxy, it's kind of part of, again, coming under that big umbrella of crystal engineering. So in the heterogeneous nucleation, I was investigating how different substrates or different underlying crystals can induce formation of another crystal on top of them. So how the interactions work there, how does that nucleation or the first instance that when molecules come together to start forming a crystal happen. So those were the ones that I was investigating at MIT. And then currently at Vertex, I'm basically using experience that I gained from both at my PhD work at Kansas State University as well as MIT.
Glad to hear that, madam. According to your point of view, what are the major challenges of become a scientist and what traits are important to become a scientist?
I think there are many challenges to becoming a scientist, but in my opinion, the major challenge is the competitiveness in the field. So it's a really competitive field. I think if you go to any field of science, that competitiveness is there. So to reach your goals, to become a scientist, you have to really work hard and work towards your goal. And I think the other thing is you need to have a good research background if you want to be in the field of science. And then you have to publish papers. In my opinion, quality plus quantity matters, so both of them should be there. And in addition, the other most important thing I see is like you have to communicate well about what you do. It doesn't matter how much you work if you don't communicate it with the other people in the scientific community. So it doesn't mean that it's going to get there. So you have to make a recognition within the scientific field to get ahead of that particular competitiveness, I think. That's the main challenge I see. And as for traits, there are many traits that you need to have. I will mention few. The first thing to be a scientist, you need to be curious. Otherwise, I mean, if you're not curious about things like what is happening there and why it is happening, those kind of questions has to come to your mind when you see something happening. That's, I think, the main point, that curiousness is the main point that drives you to become a scientist, because then you try to explore and understand what's going on. In addition, I think you need to be patient, because science experiment doesn't work all the time, and then you have to keep trying. It might take years and years to get the results that you are looking for, and also sometimes you may never get the results you're looking for. But you have to be patient, do several experiments and do the repetition. So to come to your goal, I think you have to be very, very patient. The other thing is creativity in my mind. I think most of people wouldn't agree about me, because I think most people think the scientists are not creative. I think in my mind, the creativeness is like thinking out of the box creativeness, not like doing arts creativeness. So to find solutions fast for the problems that you have given, you have to sometimes think out of the box. And then you have to come up with the solution very quickly. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the other traits that a scientist should have is you need to communicate. It doesn't matter how much work you do in your field. You need to make sure that others understand and others see your work as well. So you need to communicate. So those are kind of few of the traits I think are very important.
Okay, madam. We totally agree with you. Madam, we are interested to know how you connect chemistry with pharmaceutics.
So pharmaceutical science is like a really major field, and it has many different areas of science coming under it and are used to bring a pharmaceutical drug compound out to the world. And different fields of chemistry is involved in different part of under this pharmaceutical sciences big umbrella. For example, let's say organic chemistry. So the background is organic chemistry is very required to become a medicinal chemist or a process chemist in pharmaceutical industry. And it's involved in developing and synthesizing the pharmaceutical compounds. And then let's say analytical chemistry. So if you have a background in analytical chemistry, then you can become a part of the analytical team or the people that analyze the products that we synthesize. And then also the quality control part of the pharmaceutical industry is done by analytical chemists. And one of the other examples is computational chemistry, because with the help of computational chemistry, you can predict, model, and then design new compounds, and also reduce the workload that the experimental chemist has to do to come to an endpoint. So these are just few examples, but you can see many fields of chemistry is directly related to pharmaceutical science, can be directly come under pharmaceutical sciences.
I love what you said, madam. What are your current ongoing research programs?
So I can't go into details like what I'm currently working on, but I would say it's related to my background in crystallization and crystal engineering. So I'm basically trying to crystallize pharmaceutical ingredients. That's kind of the simplest way that I can put it, but I can't go into very details what are those research projects are.
It's okay, madam. When I went through your research topics, one of your research topics focused on hydrogen bond donors. What makes you interested in this research topic?
So as I mentioned earlier, my field of research from my PhD was in crystal engineering. And the definition of crystal engineering itself says like you have to use intermolecular interactions to modify the properties of materials. So that's basically coming from the definition of crystal engineering. So hydrogen bonding is one of those intermolecular interactions that's well known, as well as that's one of the strongest intermolecular interactions we have. So in my research, most of the time I had to use hydrogen bonding to put together these molecules to make crystals. So that's why I was very interested in hydrogen bond donors and acceptors and how they interact with each other to form hydrogen bonds, and by doing so, how we can make crystals. So that's the main thing that drives me to investigate hydrogen bond donors.
Okay, madam. For the next question, we have prepared, I think, most of the points you have included in the previous questions. Do you have anything to add on the investigations you conducted on hydrogen bond donors and the crystal engineering?
Yes, so I think I already gave kind of a brief introduction before, but I can maybe give a little bit more. So the crystal, as I mentioned, crystal engineering is the fields that use intermolecular interactions to put together materials with various properties. And if I can give some examples from my PhD, as I mentioned earlier, I work with explosive compounds. So the idea there was to make co-crystals of explosive which had kind of undesirable property, and we wanted to put it with something else to form a co-crystal so we can get rid of or diminish that undesired property. So one of the compound that I worked with had very reactivity, like very high reactivity. So because of that, it was really hard to handle that particular compound because it would react with metals or gases when it comes in contact with that particular compound. So the personnel who take them from one place to other, like transportation and then handling, storing, was very complicated because of that. So we made a co-crystal of that particular compound, and we proved that by doing so, we can reduce that reactivity, and then the compound was very safe to handle, but it still kept that energetic properties that need to be in there. That's one example. Another example is I used co-crystallization to stabilize perfluorinated alkanes. So we know that perfluorinated compounds are health hazards as well as environmental hazards. So these alkanes, the perfluorinated alkanes, were a group of compounds that had very high volatility. So if you keep the bottles of these compounds open, they just evaporate within a few minutes. And then they accumulate in the environment and harm the environment. So the idea there was, can we convert that unstable perfluorinated compounds to a stable solid compound by using co-crystallization? And it worked. So we could convert that liquid, unstable liquid, to a stable solid by mixing it, by making a co-crystal actually with some solid, stable solid co-formers. And by doing so, we could increase the stability, and then also we could reduce the harm that it can do to the environment and also the health hazards as well. And as for MIT research, as I mentioned earlier, it was in the fields of mainly heterogeneous nucleation and epitaxy. So in epitaxy, we are trying to grow crystals on top of another crystal. Where does this applicable? So in MIT, I mainly work with pharmaceutical compounds actually. So we know that in pharmaceutical industry, we discover an API, but then to bring a drug out to the world, it needs to be formulated with other fillers and then other constituents in a tablet, or it can be a vaccine or something like that. So in any of those drug products, it's not only the active ingredients there's other stuff as well. So at MIT, what I did was I was trying to crystallize the active ingredients on top of these other substrates that need to be in a tablet. So by doing so, we can reduce one unit, we call it a unit operation. That means the part of the formulation can be actually incorporated directly into the crystallization of the API. So we can reduce the number of unit operation that has to go through to get a tablet. So that's the basic idea of the research that I did at MIT. So I think that's hopefully enough details on that. Yes.
Okay, madam. It seems to be a very productive investigation. What is your area of scientific discovery that can impact the general public?
I would say most of the work that I did probably has direct applications in different areas. So for example, the examples that I gave, like right now, the explosive. Yeah. By making it safe, we can make sure that the personnel who handle them won't get hurt. And then on the other hand, the volatile liquid compound project that I mentioned. By making them stable, we can avoid the health hazards and the environmental hazards that they can give rise to. And the third one, which is epitaxial growth, which is directly related to pharmaceutical industry, and pharmaceutical industry is directly related to the health of people, right?
Okay, madam. We are interested in what are the awards that you have received and what helped you to receive the excellence?
So I have few awards. I mean, they were like university level awards that I received from Kansas State University. And I think most of them were related to the research work that I was doing. So there's excellence in research and all those kind of awards from the chemistry department. Because as for my supervisor there, I did a great job doing research, and actually, I had like 12 publications coming out of my research during my PhD. So he said it was like really great job that I did. So I think because of that, I got some awards related to research.
Okay, madam. Other than being a scientist, who are you?
I have a 3-year-old boy, and then I'm a wife, and I'm married to one of the alumni from University of Colombo itself. And then as a family, we love to spend time outside if it allows us to be outside, not these days because of COVID. But in that case, as we like to go hiking and we like to spend time in the beach. And apart from that, I like baking and decorating cakes, which is kind of my newest hobby, I would say, because I now have some time to be at home and do those things. And then I also like editing photos. Like my husband likes taking photos and I edit them.
Baking is my hobby too, madam. Glad to hear those words. According to your point of view, should scientists do work that impacts society and the environment?
Let me put it in this way. Sometimes it cannot be avoided. So in some research or some scientific fields, we have to do research that inevitably do impacts on society and environment. But some of them actually cannot be avoided. However, I think the scientists who works in those kind of fields need to be open-minded and be responsible that they do this through their research. They have this impact to the society and environment as well. So they need to be responsible about it, and then they need to make sure that they try to find alternatives or try to minimize those kind of impacts. For example, so I'm in the pharmaceutical industry, right? And so our main goal is to bring drugs to patients to improve their health. But to do that, we have to go through animal testing. So that's kind of like for some people or some activists, like let's say environmental activists or animal welfare activists, that's a bad thing. But we can't bring drugs to people if we don't go through that animal testing. So we have to weigh between the good and the bad. So to bring drug to people, we had to go through that animal testing. So the good that we do outweigh the bad we do. So we have to make sure that we balance everything, and in return, we should try to minimize the effect that we make on the environment and society. So as I mentioned, sometimes it cannot be avoided.
Okay, madam. I think it is a big topic to discuss. Okay, madam. What are your professional goals in future? And what are the fields you are focusing on?
Now, I really like what I'm doing, and I like being in this particular field, crystallization. So I think for now, at least for the short term that I foresee, my goal is to stay in this particular field of research, crystallization and crystal engineering, and work in the pharmaceutical sector. And also maybe to branch out a little bit related to other areas of crystallization. But yeah, professionally, I think for a while I'm going to stay in this particular field.
How does your work go with the current global pandemic issue? What are the impact of COVID-19 on your research and the work activities?
Yeah, it's been challenging year, and everyone has difficulties to cope with the COVID-19 situation. So am I. So the work pattern or the routine that we had pre-pandemic has all changed. So but because I'm a lab scientist, I have to be there. And also pharmaceutical industry is considered like an essential service industry. So the work has to be continued. So, and to do that, at least the lab scientists need to be there. So what we have done is like we have minimized the number of personnel inside the laboratories and inside the building to make sure that we have the social distancing, and there are number of rules and regulation and safety standards in place that we have to follow, like putting mask all the time during when we are in the lab and all those things. So I think now we've got used to it, and it's been working well as well. Just you don't get that people connection like we used to, because you don't meet or get together with people, but the rest of the work is actually going on.
Yes, madam. We feel the same. What are the challenges you think the next generation will face during research work?
I'm not sure if this is a challenge, but I think one of the things in my mind is like technologies are developing and the technologies are changing very rapidly. So the future generation has to make sure that they understand and capture those technology as fast as they can, because the field of research and the way we do research, also the needs in the fields of research are going to change with the development. And if we are not in the speed of that change, we might be left behind. So it's always one thing I think is you need to make sure that you capture the changes and then you adapt to them as fast as you can. And then you have to make sure that you understand what are the demands in the fields of research that you have to investigate. For example, I would say when we were undergrads, I think the concept of data science was there, but we didn't have any idea what does that mean. But now data science is like a very rapidly grown field, and everyone is working on data science. And people who captured the concepts of data science very early when that expansion came into play are like the professional, high level personnel in the field now. So who left behind uh, that don't know about data science doesn't have anything related to that field. So that's one of the examples. So you have to make sure that you capture that changes and then get adapted to them very fast.
There were many good points, madam. What do you have to say to the younger generation who are listening to this?
I would talk about the younger generation who are listening to this who like to be a scientist. Okay. So I think if you're planning to pursue a science career, which can be in pharmaceutical industry or any other field, I think the first thing you need to have a clear goal that you want to become a scientist, and then I want to become a scientist in this particular field. So you have to identify your passion, which area of science you want to be, and then have a goal and clear idea that how you going to reach that particular level, particular goal. So on the other hand, the field of science is, I think that's something that's never would grow old. And there's going to be opportunities in the field of science for scientists in the future as well. So it's always you need to understand the demand of the field of science, what kind of areas are coming out as very need areas in the science, and then try to be curious and results driven individual, and then try to work on those areas to finding solutions to global grand challenges.
This is really important, madam. Before wrapping things up, is there anything you to say?
I would say thank you to all of you, and especially the two of you having invited me for this interview and having this discussion with me. And I would like to thanks Dr. Bharatna and chemistry department as well, because they put together this amazing program or the course for you guys to discuss stuff with us and get some exposure, what we can do in the field of science and what are the opportunities we have. So I think it's a really useful thing that you guys are doing. And also I would like to say, anyone, if they have any questions and if you need to discuss anything about my field or about science in general, please don't hesitate to contact me in future, and I'm glad to help. And thank you.
Thank you, madam. Yes, our time is up. We must leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Tharanga Wijethunga, for receiving your precious time and share your precious knowledge and experiences with us. We would like to wish you the very best for your future endeavors. I hope it was a fascinating and inspirational discussion. It was an honor to talk with you, madam, and I would humbly like to convey our appreciation. Thanks for watching. And stay tuned for more exciting interview sessions brought about by the Department of Chemistry of University of Colombo. Thank you.